Okay, so today we're going to be representing relationships as functions in different ways. Um, so we're going to start with four questions, or we'll be doing four questions, where we have some information. They'll ask you to write an equation and then do something with that equation. So let's get started. Let's look at this first question. It says production, guys. It says a manufacturer produces 950 light bulbs per day. We'll start with part A. Write an equation to find the number of bulbs B and the number of bulbs B the manufacturer makes in any number of days D. Okay. Everyone go to your markup tool. So go to the markup tool and pick a color for your highlighter, whatever color you like. Um, and pick I usually use the box highlighter. That's usually the easiest to work with. Um, Go over here where it says a manufacturer produces 950 light bulbs per day. Let's highlight 950 light bulbs per day. So this is a rate. This is known as a rate. Whenever they say per minute, miles per hour, light bulbs per day, feet per second, the word per kind of gives you a clue that it's a rate. And we're going to use it in our equation. Let's go into part A. Let's go to the part where they tell us which variables to use. So you see it says number of light bulbs B. Let's highlight that. So in our equation, we're going to use B as the number of light bulbs. And we're going to use D for the number of days. Highlight that part where it says D number of days. So when you're asked to do this part on your own, make sure you highlight the same information for the problem you're going to do. All right. So now we come to the point where we have to come up with an equation for the number of light bulbs. And they give us a table to help us out, right? Day 1, they had 950. Day 2, 1,900. Day 3, 2,850, etc. So we want to come up with an equation. If you put in the number of days, it will tell you how many light bulbs were produced up until that day. Okay? Um, so let's think about this. Go to your text box tool, and you want the font size to be about 16 or so. And we want the number of light bulbs. So the number of light bulbs is the variable B, right? So the number of light bulbs, if we wanted to figure out for any day, any given day, so say for the third day, how many light bulbs? How many light bulbs are they making each day? 950. So they're making 950, but that's per day. And so if I want for any day, what variable are we using for days? D. So if we multiply that 950 you make per day times whatever day it is, first day, second day, third day, etc., hopefully that should give us how many total light bulbs you have. Let's test it out. So what I'd like us to do is plug in one of our numbers like 3. That's why I highlighted this row. We're going to replace D with 3 and check and see if we do the math, do we get 2,850? Let's try it out. B equals 950. Instead of multiplying it times D, we're going to multiply it times 3. Okay? So that's going to be 950 times, use a little star for 3. And let's see what that gives us. We don't have necessarily a calculator here, right? Or maybe you do. Let me show you what you can use instead. We have our calculation, 950 times 3. Let's multiply. Open up a new tab. Just open up a new tab. Okay. I'm going to go to this new tab for the moment. And just type in the calculation you want. 950 multiplied by 3. And just press return or enter. And you get 2,850, which happens to be the exact amount we wanted to get. So pretty much this is telling us that, yes, that's the equation we want. We have the equation we were looking for. We tested it out and it worked. So the equation we'll want to use from now on is B, the number of light bulbs, is 950 times D. Okay? So now I'm going to have you answer part B. Use the equation to determine how many light bulbs the manufacturer will make in 25 days. And so I want you to do the same type of calculation using the equation we came up with. And in the end, you're going to answer the sentence. You'll finish it up. So make sure you answer the sentence with the following. In 25 days, manufacturer will produce, and I'll just put dot, dot, dot. Where I'm putting dot, dot, dot is your answer. Whatever calculation answer you get. Bulbs. Period. Do your calculation here above it, get an answer, and then write that answer to complete the sentence. And I'll give you about 5 minutes to do that. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to move on to question number 2. Question number 2, let's just read it together, and then I'm going to let you finish it up. You're going to do the exact same process that we did before. So let's read number 2. So it says, the workers at a plant drink 38 gallons of water per day. We're going to start with writing an equation to find the number of gallons G the workers drink in any number of days D. So it's 38 gallons per day. That's our rate. They're telling us the number of gallons is G, and the number of days D. And I want you to use the same value to test out your equation you come up with. So you're going to develop your equation on your own this time. But figure out for 3 days. Test out this value just like we did for 3 days with the light bulbs. So you're going to come up with your equation, test it for day 3, see how many gallons you get, make sure it matches up with this. And then you're going to do the same thing. Answer part B, where it says use the equation to determine how many gallons of water the workers will drink in 30 days. So you do the equation and then write a sentence explaining your answer. Okay? So the same process we did in number 1, I'd like you to redo it in number 2, okay? And I'll give you some time to do that. Okay, so for those of you watching the video, hopefully you're done now with this part of the answer, or number 2. Please make sure that you also include a sentence like the one I just wrote here and you complete it with the correct answer. The workers drank, and dot, dot, dot should be your answer, the number of gallons after 30 days. Complete the sentence and include that in your answer, please. Okay, let's move on to number 3. So for number 3, we're going to do a few things. We're going to read and set up an equation. We're going to complete a table, and then we're going to use the values from the table to make a graph and plot the points, okay? So let's do it. You guys ready? All right. So this says allowance. Chet gets $12 per week as allowance. Write an equation to find the amount of allowance A Chet receives in any number of weeks W. Okay, so that's the first part. Let's get our important information and highlight it. We've got $12 per week that Chet gets. And then what are we calling the amount of allowance? Amount of allowance is A for allowance. That makes sense. And what's our other variable? W for weeks. Thank you. Okay. So that's what we want. So by now we've done a few of these, right? It should be super easy to come up with this equation, I'm hoping. Let's type it up. So if we want the amount of allowance, A, that's going to equal, give me the other side of this equation, the allowance for any week. If he's making $12 per week, what am I going to write? 12 times the number of weeks, 12W, perfect. Okay, so we got our equation. Let's move on to part B. Part B asks us to make a table to find the amount of allowance Chet receives in 5, 6, 7, or 8 weeks. So we're going to fill in this table here. Let's just highlight that. 5, 6, 7, or 8 weeks. So we're going to go to our table here. And we're going to fill in those numbers. Actually, let's do the calculations first. I think that would be quicker. So over here in this workspace, we're going to use that equation. And so the allowance would be 12 times, for the first week the first week we have to find the allowance for is 5, right? So we'll have to multiply 12 times 5. That's 60, right? $60 to be exact. At the 5-week mark, he'll have $60 in allowance. What's our next one? We got 6. And so how much money would that be? Well, you could think of it 2 ways. You can multiply 12 times 6 or just add 12 to the previous amount. Either way, that's what we're doing. So if either what's 12 times 6 or what's 60 plus 12? 72. Okay. We got 12 times 7. We can just increment that, add another, yeah. So we're going to move on from that. And what do we get that? 84. And we'll do the last one. 12 times 8. And that's 96. We got our values. Let's fill in the table. Okay. So these are the numbers. Let's work on this table now. The first week we want is 5 weeks, and that was $60. Then we have 6 weeks, $72. I don't think this will line up perfectly, but that's okay. 7 weeks. $84. And we'll end it up with 8 week. Funny is back when they first made these problems in this worksheet, they probably thought $12. Wow, that's big money. All right, there we are. Okay, make sure you have that because now we're going to build a graph. We're going to make a graph from this information from scratch. So we have a completely blank graph. Sometimes they have it partially filled for you, right? You just got to plot the points. Well, this one's completely blank. So we have to look into a few things. And I want you to pay attention what we label on each axis, on the x-axis, on the y-axis. Okay? Is everyone ready? Okay, let's move on to the graph. So up here, we're going to make a graph. Let me just zoom in a little more. Okay, there we go. That's better. Okay, so as you can see, it's completely blank. And you always want to start with the x-axis, the one horizontally here. And the thing is, if you have information you have to put into a graph, and here we're measuring allowance and time, the number of weeks. Anytime you have the units of time, if it's minutes, hours, weeks, years, whatever it is, if time is involved in the problem you're working, time should always go, or we'll say, as a rule, normally would always go on the x-axis. So we're going to measure weeks here, right? So we need to measure up to how many weeks? 8 weeks. Do we have enough room here to put all 8 weeks if we count by ones? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, we do. We can go all the way up to 9. So let's do that. Let's put in the numbers 0 through 9. So 0, and then just kind of tab over or space over, and you want to put the 1 there, 2, 3, 4, 6. Okay. We're there. You just scoot it on up a little bit. Make sure they line up a little better. Okay. I'll let you do that part. Give you a minute. So we got the numbers. We're missing one important part on this side of the graph. Well, before we even move on to the y-axis, we'll definitely go to the y-axis, and we're going to measure allowance, money there. How do we know what we're talking about? What is this measuring on this axis? Weeks. We got to say that. We have to label it with weeks. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the text box, and underneath here, we'll just label this with weeks. Okay? It's very important on these graphs that have, it's not just a regular old graph with X and Y that we normally do. This one is telling us something, and we have to explain what it is we're saying. Weeks. And we'll do the same thing on the other side when we do allowance. Okay? All right. So we have the weeks. They're all labeled and ready to go. Now let's move on to the allowance. Let's just type that in, allowance. So over here on the side, let's type in the word allowance and then in parentheses next to it, $sign to specify we're measuring in dollars. Allowance, parentheses, $sign. Okay. Except I'd like it to look a little better. We're going to flip this. Have you guys ever flipped text on a Cami? If you know what to do, go ahead and do it. If you're not sure, what you want to do is just hover over your word, the blue part where the box is, and you're going to see a few tools pop up. The third one, the one with a little circle showing rotation, that's the one you want to hit. And it's going to rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise. So once you get this tool, press on this one. It's to rotate, and it will rotate it for you. Okay? And we'll just scooch it on in right there. So now we're saying we're measuring the allowance in dollars on the y-axis. All right. So now the trickiest part of all, we got 9 spaces. How high up, how much money are we talking about? What's the largest dollar amount we have to cover? $96, so like 100. So if it was 10 spaces, that would be perfect because we could go by tens, right? 10, 20, 30, all the way up to 100. But we got 9 spaces, so $10, counting by tens is not good enough. Um, what other value might be helpful and that we could still use? So we want to go a little more than 10, but maybe 20 is too much because, 20 with that would be, what's 2 times 20 times 9? Yeah. Yeah. 15. Let's see. So if we go 15, every 2 spaces would be how much? This is 15. What's the second space? 30. So this would be 30. 2 spaces more would be 60, 90. Yeah. Actually, that would probably work. Okay. So let's count by 15. That should cover everything we need. And then some. Okay. So go back to the text tool over here on the second number, on the second increment. We'll just do the 30s and 60s. This is $30. Okay. Go up 2 more from there. We'll make this $60. And then the next one, 2 up from there, we would have $90. And then 2 up from there would put us at $120. Okay. So I'll give you a minute to catch up with that. All right. So now we got our graph. We're measuring weeks on the x-axis, allowance in dollars on the y-axis. We just have to plot our points. So we have that information here below us. So to plot the points, go to drawing. Is everybody ready to start plotting points? You guys are ready? Okay. Go to drawing, pick a color, nice bright color or something that would work. You're going to make dots, okay? So make sure the stroke thickness here is 6, or the 6 is perfect actually. Make sure it's 6. If the transparency should be all the way to as dark as you can get it. So stroke thickness 6, transparency all the way up to the darkest. Pick a color you like. Let's make some dots. Our first dot has to be at 5, week 5, and we have to go up to 60. So right there, where 5 and 60 meet, we'll put a dot. So put a dot there, okay? Then go to 6. What value do we want for 6? 72. Okay, that might be a little challenging. We have to figure out where 72 is on this graph. And it doesn't necessarily tell you. Okay, this is 90, so that's too high. Where I'm at right there, halfway between 60 and 90, how much is that? Remember, we're counting by 15s. So if it's 60 and you add 15, where am I at? 75. And that's almost exactly where we want. We just want to go a little bit under 75. Maybe right there, just under 75. That's about 72. Just under that mark where 75 is. So there's my second one. That's 75. And now we want 84. So for 7, we want 84. So let's go here and follow it up. And okay, this is too high because it's 90. 84 would be just under there, right? Maybe about there. Do you see that they're kind of in line or very close to being in line? So now we just have one last point to make at 95. So go to 8, follow it up. This is 90. So that's a little bit lower than what we want. We want 95. And by now you should just say, okay, it's going to form a line. This is a linear equation. So just put the point where they seem to be kind of falling in line. There we go. Okay. Now, the only thing left now is number 4. And I'm pretty much going to leave you to do number 4. You don't have to make a graph for number 4, but you do have to come up with an equation. Make sure you highlight the information that's important like we've been doing. Come up with your equation. They're going to tell you some values that you want to use like we had here. And then you're going to build the table, okay? So, any questions? All right. So your job from here on in is to answer this question. Number 4. It says aquarium. An aquarium costs $85 plus $2 per fish. Make a table to find the cost of an aquarium plus 3, 4, 5, or 6 fish. So that's the part that's going to be for the table. Okay? So they're telling you what to use for the cost, the variable to use, the cost for fish, the number of fish, and then you're going to build the table. All right, guys. So the last thing is this particular equation is going to be a little bit different. You're going to write the cost, C, equals some fixed amount for the aquarium. Then they say plus some other rate for the fish times the number of fish. So this is a type of equation. It's a little different. If you read the problem, you'll see what the equation should be. Write the equation, and then you're going to use that equation to fill in the chart, okay? So I'll leave you to finish that. And once you're done with that, that's it. Turn it in. We're done with this assignment. Okay? Any questions? All right. And if you're doing this at home, make sure you do the same thing and make sure you turn it in.